A squirrel chewing on a wire and taking down the local power grid sounds like the punchline to a joke. But when that flash of light hits a utility pole and an entire neighborhood goes dark, it represents a recurring failure in an infrastructure system that is currently failing to account for nature. Every year, animal-caused outages result in over $10 billion in physical damage and lost economic productivity worldwide. We try to keep them out. We build chain-link fences and install complicated climbing deterrents, but our electrical grid overlaps directly with the natural environment. To a wild animal, a substation or a utility pole offers a perfect high-altitude perch, a source of reliable warmth, and a secure place to build a nest. The grid's design makes it an unintentional electrified trap, offering resources that draw wildlife directly into a dangerous proximity to live high-voltage components. Historically, utility companies treated these events as simple acts of nature, random, unavoidable accidents. But a closer look at the forensic data reveals they actually stem from a specific identifiable engineering flaw. This flaw kills millions of birds every year. For many populations, these infrastructure-related deaths are the primary driver toward local extinction. Take the Bonelli's eagle. On its normal migration routes, it routinely encounters these power structures, and electrocution has become its leading cause of death. These eagles aren't dying because of random bad luck. They die because the biological dimensions of their bodies are physically incompatible with the geometry of our power lines. To understand why, we have to look at the air gap. In electrical engineering, an air gap is the specific distance of empty space used to safely separate bare metal conductors. The higher the voltage, the wider the gap needs to be. This schematic highlights the layout of a typical medium voltage distribution pole. The safety gap between the live conductor wire and the grounded crossarm is often only 30 to 40 centimeters. Now, consider what happens when a migratory bird attempts to land or take off from this structure. With a massive 2-meter wingspan fully extended, the animal's feathers physically cross that 40-centimeter air gap, instantly completing the electrical circuit. This reference scale shows the disconnect between grid engineering and biological reality. When you contrast a 3.2-meter stork or a 2-meter eagle against the tight clearances of local power distribution, the math simply fails. And the damage doesn't stop with the animal. The resulting arc flash causes a secondary hardware failure known as stranding. The immense heat burns away individual layers of the conductor wire, trip after trip, until the line snaps and drops to the ground. The physical size of the local wildlife directly contradicts the safety margins engineered into the local power grid. Contact is inevitable. High-voltage transmission lines are engineered with much wider air gaps, which effectively prevents animals from physically bridging the space between the wires. But biology still finds a workaround, leading to a failure known as guano pollution flashover. This field photograph captures the buildup. Over long, dry seasons, birds roost on the towers directly above the hardware, depositing feces until a thick layer of guano completely covers the ridges of the electrical insulators. As long as the weather stays dry, the system holds. The environmental trigger is moisture. When heavy fog or seasonal rain finally arrives, the water interacts with the uric acid, turning the dried guano into a chemically conductive liquid. This conductive sludge effectively shrinks the electrical resistance of the insulator. The current tracks right down the liquid layer, bypassing the safety distance entirely and triggering a massive arc flash. Even when grid engineers build gaps wide enough to avoid physical contact, the natural biology of the roosting birds chemically shrinks the safety margin until the system breaks. The constraints of fixing this are brutal. We cannot shrink the wingspans of migrating eagles, and rebuilding millions of miles of existing grid to widen the structural gaps would cost trillions. The viable solution relies on advanced material science. Instead of moving the wires further apart, engineers can insulate the exact bare metal vulnerabilities on the existing hardware. Utility crews deploy specialized, UV-stable polymeric heat shrink tubing and wraparound covers. Clamping down over the exposed connections, these materials form a weather-resistant dielectric barrier that prevents current from reaching the air. By applying these targeted materials to specific hardware points, we can adapt a rigid human grid to the unpredictable shape of the animals living around it. Because these material solutions are now widely available, A power company can no longer legally dismiss a dead bird as an unavoidable accident. This has created a severe legal shift. In Spain, utility firms like Endesa have been taken to court, facing criminal charges for ecological crimes over grid negligence. When a utility fails to retrofit a pylon with known vulnerabilities and a protected eagle is electrocuted, executives now face direct prosecution and millions of dollars in fines. Retrofitting the grid is now a legal obligation. Utility companies are being forced to align their hardware with the biological requirements of the species living among them.